Welcome back, my friends. Today we're going to round out the drive line on the Supra. We're going to install the drive shaft. The drive shaft I have here is a 4.5 inch 134 wall Napco DOM steel tube with forged ends. It has the Dana Spicer 5 1350X hardened U-joints in it. These are the non-serviceable U-joint that is solid. There's no Zerk fitting in it to grease the caps. So you have to keep an eye on these, especially for serviceability. Now, since you can't service them, you do get more strength out of them because they're solid, and that's preferred especially in a heavier stock car road race application where you're constantly up and down shifting on the fly. It has a Mark Williams hardened 8-inch yoke in it. The longer yoke is for our double support bearing mid-valley transmission. The transmission has a bearing in the front and in the rear, and the shaft of the tail housing actually extends past the output shaft of the transmission. This is what we're going with. We're going to get this installed. Once we're done with that, we're going to put the hard tunnel on the car, and then goes the exhaust system. I'm going to pull my headers apart and I'm going to clean them, and I'm going to stick them on the engine, get it centered where I want it, and then start working my way back. Let's get to it, my friends. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to slide the shaft back so I can get it lined up and in the transmission first. Install it in the rear U-joint. Everything lines up, and now we're going to install our axle straps. These are some chromoly ones that came from my friend Mr. Tex Powell and Mike Powell, two really good guys. Both are legends in the sport and people I'm proud to call my friends. So we're going to get this bolted in, and then next comes our hard tunnel. So at full droop, I've got almost a 1/2 inch clearance here at my cross member, and my tube is centered on the hard tunnel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten my U-joints, and then I'm going to take my floor jack and raise the rear housing to make sure that nothing binds and comes close to the top of the tunnel. So I'll cycle the rear suspension up and down to see how much clearance I have all the way around. So let's tighten those U-joints and get a floor jack and do that. So far, everything looks good. It's nice and centered. As you can see, our tech straps have our 5 1350X U-joint bolted securely to our Mark Williams yoke on the rear gear. Plenty of clearance around the drive shaft all the way through the hard tunnel. Clears on both sides. Moving forward, we're going to put the hard tunnel on next. Up here at the transmission, you can see with our yoke, we've got about 1.5 inches of clearance, almost 2 inches of slip. So that's more than enough. The yoke in the transmission actually comes up to about here, and there's 2 bearings in there. There's a bearing here at the rear. The shaft actually stops about there, and there's another bearing up here in the front. So it's held in 2 spots. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and get the hard tunnel, get the rest disassembled. So this is the exhaust system we're going to go with on the Supra. These are a set of Inconel ProFab headers. They're for a phase 14. These are 2-inch primary, stepped to a 2 1/8-inch secondary, flowing through a tri-Y collector design into a 4.5 by 2.5-inch oval exhaust. Just past the transmission crossmember on the right side, there's my merge X pipe. It goes out my boom tubes, which have been coated with a high temp black by Calico Coatings. The reason for the ends to be coated is because this car has a composite body, and that's going to cut down on the heat where my right side skirt is and my aluminum exhaust opening. It's also going to get pelted from gravel and other objects from the right rear wheel. We're going to pull this apart. We're going to clean it with some brake cleaner. I'm going to wipe it down, get all the rubber and gook off them. These headers were race used when I picked them up. And then we're going to wipe it down with some Zepp stainless steel cleaner and polish. Now this isn't going to take the tarnish off of the headers, but it is going to clean them up and it's going to condition them. I want a clean set of headers that look good and they're conditioned when they go back in the car for longevity. The first time I start it up, it's going to change the color of them anyway, so I'm not worried about that. This is a good product. I recommend it. I paid cash money for this. It's not an endorsement from Zepp. I've used it in many applications. Your results may vary, but I'm a fan of this product. It's not something I would tell you to buy if I didn't use it or pay cash for it myself. Here we are. We're going to pull it apart. We're going to clean it. We're going to hang the headers on the block loosely, and we're going to get the rest of the exhaust system fitted to the car before we tighten everything down. Let's get to it, my friends. Like I said, this just cleans and conditions them. This one's been cleaned, and as you can tell, there's a different luster to the header and the metal, and it conditions the metal pretty good. I like the product. I think it works well. That's why I use it. So we're going to wipe down the other header, and then we're going to get all of this on the car. Now that we've got the exhaust system cleaned up, let's get it in the car. First thing we're going to do is we're going to pull the block plate off on this side. This protects the engine in transport and during storage. So we're going to pull this off. Get this out of the way. That's down and out of the way. And we're going to get this one off. Like I said, this engine has one race on it. And it made right at 800 horse with an 830 carburetor on it. Now this is my header gasket. It's a multi-layer steel design. It's made by Cometic. As you can see, there's multiple layers of thin steel in there that create the exhaust seal. So we're going to slip these on. Then we're going to hang our header up here. And then we're going to loosely bolt it to the head. So our gaskets are in place. Now this is a race-used engine. This engine has one race and 40 practice laps on its last rebuild. Now our header, slide it into place, get it on the head, and we'll stick 2 bolts on it just to hold it in place. These are jet nut style header bolts. The Toyota engine uses a stud and not a bolt like your typical small block Chevy. So that's our stainless header on this side. It's loose so that I can get the collector and the rest of the system on. Let's move over to the other side and we'll hang that header. All right, we'll pull the block off plate on this side. We'll hang the other header. Stick our header gaskets on. Both headers are now hooked up to the cylinder heads. They're hanging there loosely, so when I go into the car to connect my Y pipe, they slide on and I can manipulate them left and right without having to force them in place. We're going to leave the entire system loose until we get everything all the way out to the boom tube on the edge of the car bolted in. Let's get to it now. Next up, we'll slide our extension tubes on. These are used on both sides. And then, like I said before, I left everything loose. That way I can manipulate it left to right and get it to go onto my Y pipe. And then we'll lift up the boom tube and we'll get it in place. Now this is lightweight Inconel, so it's really not that heavy. Next, we'll bolt on our boom tube, get everything angled right where we want it. There we go. I'm going to throw a bolt in here. This is a 5/16 bolt with a washer and a locking mechanical locking nut on it. It's not a nylock. A nylock will melt out of it. Now I'm going to throw a couple of rounds in this 5/16 with a mechanical lock nut on it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten this just a few rounds so that it doesn't back off and the thread doesn't loosen. And I've also got a safety strap that's going to run from the front to the back here. That was mandated by NASCAR as well to hold the actual boom tube tip itself. Once I get the headers tightened up, I can manipulate this end to fit my aluminum side skirt for the exhaust exit. And then we'll tighten this down. I'll put the actual safety strap on here. There's also another safety strap. Let me turn the camera. There's also another safety strap that goes around the center of the crossover and connects to the bottom of the transmission mount right here. It keeps this part of the exhaust system from moving as well as a few more safety bolts that go in the actual collector of the header as well. Let's get the headers tightened down and then we'll work our way back with the rest of the system. Our ProFab stainless headers are held to the cylinder head via stud. Each exhaust port has 3 studs, each side that's 12 bolts. I've used some fine thread bolts just to hold the actual tube on. But the correct bolt for the stud is actually a jet nut style flanged mechanical locking nut. So we're going to go ahead and install these loosely on both sides. And then once we get all 24 on the cylinder head, we'll go around and we'll tighten them up in a pattern to pull everything down equally. Now that's all 12 header bolts tightened on both sides. Now once I run this thing and we do a leak check for the first time and we get it hot, we'll come back and we'll retorque all of these. Everything's tight, nothing's loose. Now we're going to go to the rear of the car and we're going to hook up the boom tube permanently. We're going to mount it in place. We're going to install our fender skirt and we're going to get our boom tube placement. Well guys, it looks like we came up a couple inches short of where the pipes were originally mounted. When I was laying under the car and looking at it, I kind of thought the boom tube came up a little short from what I remembered during disassembly. I remember them being kind of right at the leading edge of the right rear wheel, and I thought to myself, what changed? I used the same boom tube, I used the same crossover, I used the same merge collectors, and then it hit me, the headers. The headers are what's different. So I pulled down the headers that were on the mock-up engine and I measured them. Come to find out they're 6 1/4 inch longer and they're super speedway headers compared to the short track road course headers I have on it now. Well, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Depends on how you look at it in perspective. I went and I measured my other Xfinity cars and my Gen 6 cars, and they actually come up between 5 and 6 inches from the leading edge of the right rear wheel. So when I measure our car, we're exactly right at 5 inches from the leading edge. It's not a big deal. I'm not worried about it. I'm not discouraged about it. It's nothing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build a new aluminum side skirt shield for the exhaust, and I'm going to put new skirts on the car anyway. The ones that were on it from mock-up when I got it, they were kind of wonky anyway. It had been loaded on and off several trailers going to the wind tunnel. They were wavy. They were a little beat up, and they were cut a little bit different, and the rake in them isn't exactly how I'm going to run the car. So once I get the car at ride height, I'll build a new set of skirts to go on it and finish fab. The driveline is done as well. Hard tunnel is on, drive shaft is in, rear gear, rear end, motor, transmission, everything's locked in place. What's next? I think I'm going to jump on the front suspension. I've got a set of 5-degree spindles. I may swap them out for the 8s that are on there. I'm definitely going to change the ball joints, put a brand new set of Moog billet performance ball joints on it. I am going to put new calipers on the front. I'm picking up another set of Brembo 6 pistons from Pro Systems. My good friend John over there rebuilt them for me. We're going to put all that on, and you'll see that in the next video. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch these videos. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate you guys subscribing to the channel. It means a lot to me. We just recently broke 5,000 subscribers, and the channel's growing. Thanks to you guys. I appreciate it. You guys have a great week ahead.